Ever had that feeling where you signed up for a subscription and 6 months later you realised you were getting less than when you started, and somehow you're paying more? This week, Australia's consumer watchdog decided they'd had enough. Hi, I'm Ming Johanson and this is your weekly tech news, the version where I read the fine print so you don't have to. And we've got a big week. Amazon's in court here in Australia. AI is making your next mobile phone more expensive. Google's finding out that the AI wrote it isn't much of a legal defence. An AI model was effectively grounded by the US government, while PlayStation quietly reminded us that buying something isn't always the same as owning it. Let's jump in. Let's start here at home. The ACCC has taken Amazon to the federal court. Here's what they're alleging. Amazon changed the experience people had already paid for. Prime Video used to be largely ad-free, then ads appeared, and if you wanted the experience you originally signed up for, you suddenly needed to pay another $2.99 a month. This was on top of your existing Prime subscription you'd already paid for. The ACCC says more than 850,000 Australians were affected. They argued Amazon relied on unfair contract terms, they're seeking penalties, refunds, and a range of other orders. And this really isn't just an Amazon story, it's a contract story. The ACCC effectively said to every subscription business in Australia, go and read your own terms and conditions. If your contract says you can change the deal whenever you feel like it, while your customer can't cancel or get a refund, that's exactly the kind of thing regulators are now paying attention to. Let's talk about your next phone. Everyone keeps saying AI is changing everything. Well, one of the first things it's changing is the price tag. There's a domino effect. AI companies are buying enormous amounts of specialised memory chips to build data centres. Those same chips are also used in mobile phones and laptops. So when AI companies buy more, there's less available for everyone else. Less supply plus same demand equals higher prices. Samsung and Apple are both expected to pass on some of those increased costs on when their next flagship devices are released. One of the world's biggest chip manufacturers, SK Hynix, is reportedly planning to invest around $700 billion in expanding production. That's an extraordinary amount of money for tiny chips that fit inside the device in your pocket. So if your current phone still works, maybe give it another year before upgrading. Sometimes the smartest tech decision is simply holding off. Anthropic's new model, Fable 5, was effectively unavailable to many users for 19 days. Not because it broke, but because of government export controls. The US government temporarily restricted access while it worked through export rules surrounding advanced AI technology. Eventually, those restrictions were resolved and the model returned, but we're reaching a point where governments can effectively switch off access to AI systems, the same way that they control exports of strategic technology. The question simply isn't which AI is the smartest anymore, it's increasingly becoming who gets access to it. How many AI tools, browser extensions, or little productivity apps have you installed this year because someone online said they were amazing? And that's exactly what cybercriminals are taking advantage of. Security researchers recently discovered fake AI browser extensions that almost looked identical to legitimate tools were installed more than 900,000 times. One even carried Google's own featured badge. Meanwhile, it was quietly collecting people's AI conversations and sending them somewhere else. Think about what we put into AI. Business plans, client information, marketing strategies, personal questions, sometimes even passwords. The bit that worries me is these attacks aren't succeeding because hackers suddenly become geniuses. They're succeeding because we've become comfortable clicking install before asking questions. We get excited, someone says, this AI tool changed my life. 5 minutes later, we're installing it without thinking too hard about where it came from. So the boring advice that genuinely protects your business, download AI tools from official websites, type the website address in yourself, don't trust ads, don't trust sponsored links, and don't assume a featured badge means something is automatically safe. Let's head into space. Rocket Labs has agreed to buy satellite communications company Iridium for around $8 billion US. Now, on the surface, this looks like a space company buying another space company, but it's much smarter than that. Rocket Labs already knows how to launch rockets. Iridium already has a functioning satellite network with 66 satellites in orbit and millions of customers. Instead of spending years building all of that, Rocket Labs has simply bought the finished version. It's the business equivalent of buying a house that's already built. Instead of pouring the concrete yourself, the really interesting trend here is that space companies don't just want rockets anymore, they want satellites. The customers, the data, they want the whole ecosystem. Google had a very uncomfortable week in court. The biggest case came out of Germany. The court ruled that Google could potentially be responsible for false information generated by its own AI overviews. Here's why that's significant. Traditional Google search points you towards someone else's website. AI overviews actually writes new content. The court essentially said those aren't the same things. Search points, AI writes. If Google writes it, Google owns it. The case involved publishers who were falsely linked to scam allegations that weren't supported by the articles Google cited. Now, this isn't the final decision. Google is appealing, but it's the first meaningful crack in what could become a much bigger legal question. And that matters because businesses rely on people Googling their names. Imagine an AI inventing a lawsuit that never happened or suggesting your business was under investigation when you weren't. Customers don't always click through to verify that information. Sometimes they simply move on. That's why this case is worth watching. Europe continues to send a very clear message to big tech. The rules still apply. And finally, Sony has announced that from 2028, new PlayStation games will no longer be released on physical discs. Now, your existing collection is perfectly safe, nothing changes there, but new releases will be digital only. Maybe a download, maybe a code inside a box, no actual disc. When you bought a disc, you owned it. You could lend it, sell it, put it on a shelf, find it 20 years later. Digital ownership doesn't really work like that. You're buying access, and access depends on someone else's server staying online. It's another reminder that we're quietly moving away from owning products to renting access. Now, I'd love your thoughts. What's one subscription you pay for that has quietly become worse over time? More expensive, more ads, less value? Let me know in the comments. Looking back over this week's stories, there's one theme that keeps showing up: control. Who controls your subscription? Who controls your data? Who controls AI? Who controls the information you see? Who controls whether you truly own the things you buy? You can't control all of that, neither can I, but we can understand it. And once we understand it, we make better decisions for ourselves, our businesses, and the people we care about. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me to update yourself on the tech news this week. I'm Ming Johanson, and I'll see you next week.